Hello and welcome to Express Sports Podcast. You're listening to Game Time with me, Mihir Vasavra. Joining us today is the man who literally eats, breathes, sleeps, drinks, whatever it is that's humanly possible sport. Vinayak Monarangan, welcome. This episode would not have been possible without you because, we'll be talking about the 100 days to go for the Olympics. It's not today when the episode comes out, it'll be in a couple of days. But we thought it's the best time to kind of take a stock of all the Indian athletes Vinayak, practically, is it possible to do all of them?
It might not be possible to fit everything in one podcast. So we'll focus on the big ones, I guess. Be a good place to start with 100 days to go.
Yeah, the big ones, and it couldn't be bigger than Neeraj Chopra then, is it? Let's start with him. You recently were attending a conference where he was kind of laying out his plans, where he'll be beginning, what his targets and stuff. So let's not waste much time because lots to cover. What were the biggest takeaways for you from that?
It was a very typical Neeraj Chopra press conference, very lighthearted, confident about where he is in training. The thing that stuck me was, track and field is one of the events where you're not competing all through the year. He's not been active for a few months now. There is a big off season in especially the throwing events. While the running events have indoor season, the throwing events don't. So it'll be May 10th. This year is when we'll see Neeraj in action for the first time at the typical javelin curtain racer in Doha, Diamond League. So he spoke about that. Of course, the 90-meter mark question came up. No Neeraj Chopra press conference is complete without the question about 90 meters. And he had a very interesting take about that. So he was asked if, at Paris, if he's hoping to breach 90. His very quick response was, I hope to clear 90 before Paris. That's how his season is going to start in Doha. A very popular meet for javelin throwers. All the big names participate. We expected to see Anderson Peters, Vetter, Jakub Vadlek, all of those guys are going to be there. Kishore Kumar Jena is going to be there. 2 Indians in one javelin meet. He spoke about that as well, how it's kind of a dream come true for Indian athletics to have 2 javelin throwers in one Diamond League meet. He's spoken about this for a fair few times before, how that's where we need to be, like Indians competing at the international meets regularly. So he spoke about that. He also quipped, you guys have been asking me about 90 meters for so long, I won't be surprised if Kishore crosses 90 before I do. So that was a good response from him, typical Neeraj, as you would say. So he's looking forward to the season.
It's kind of amazing how, you can't imagine how much pressure Neeraj will be under heading into the Olympics. Even now, we just 100 days off from the Olympics, but he never lets that show. I think that's one of his biggest qualities, so to say. But you mentioned all the big names, Vinayak, and I also found it interesting that he spoke about Max Denning, the new German sensation who's kind of just arrived out of practically nowhere. And Neeraj has kind of read up on him, seen a lot of videos and stuff, purely because when he was asked about the quote-unquote 16-year-old, Neeraj corrected and said he's 19. So that shows that he's following very closely. And if you can just put into perspective the whole transition, right, from the throw and everything.
Neeraj spoke about Max, clearly someone that he's been keeping an eye on, or ear on, if not an eye on. So Max has actually caught the attention of quite a few people in the javelin in the athletics community, actually. We had an interview with him. Indian Express Nihal Koshi had done a quick Q&A with him. It was quite interesting. The thing with him is, as Neeraj very funnily mentioned, he skipped the whole 80s chapter in javelin throwing. Went from the late 79 to directly crossing 90. You don't really see that very often. So it'll be interesting to see if that was a one-off or whether he can sustain, because, there are no actual active 90-meter. Vetter and all these Anderson Peters are all there, but they've not hit that mark in a long time. So if Max can actually go past 90 again at Pavo Nurmi Games where Neeraj and him would be together, that would shake things up. It'll certainly put a little more pressure on that 90-meter mark, as if there wasn't enough for Neeraj. So that's certainly one thing to keep an eye on for sure. But it's also worth noting that it's one throw. So we need to see a little more of Max before we know whether he can be a real contender in Paris or not.
And also it's important to note, right? We've mentioned this, I think, every time we've spoken Neeraj. And of course, it's important for him to have that 90-meter mark assurance heading into the Olympics so that he knows that he can throw it, right? But also it's important to note that, the Olympics aren't necessarily decided by such big throws. It's also about maintaining your nerves that day, just getting used to the conditions. Neeraj also spoke about how hot it was in Tokyo, but at the same time, it could be hot and humid even in Paris. Although their definition of heat wave really surprises us all. But still, it could be hot in Paris. So all those factors also will come into play. So it's not necessarily only about the 90-meter mark and our obsession with that, I guess.
Exactly. And which is also something that Neeraj is good at, right? Like knowing the conditions. He's spoken about this so many times, I don't care if I throw 90 or not as long as I win the event that he's in. And he's one of the best when it comes to reading conditions early and knowing what a good throw is and kind of optimizing his technique to do well in that particular conditions. That's something that he's really good at. So yeah, that is an advantage for him over the rest of the field, I would think. So yeah, a couple of big events coming up. So he didn't reveal the exact number of events he's going to be participating before Paris. We know two for sure, the Doha Diamond League and Pawan Nurmi Games, which is one of those javelin hotspots in the European circuit. He's participated there regularly. I'm guessing there is a couple more Diamond League meets that could happen before Paris. I'm not 100% sure how many of them have men's javelin. So he said whatever Diamond League meets are there, so he'd take part in those. So it's going to be probably 4 or 5 events in the lead up to Paris if he's fit and, doesn't pick up any niggles like he did, I think, last year. So yeah, that's where Neeraj is at. And, it's getting close to Neeraj season, which I think automatically builds up excitement towards Paris.
So, Vinayak, I think it's a nice segue because we move from an Olympic gold medalist to an Olympic silver medalist. And one common thing that binds them both is the number 90. For Neeraj, it's the distance that he has to throw the javelin. And for Mirabai Chanu, it's the weight that she hopes to kind of lift in the snatch category, which could directly vault her into the second place at the Olympics if she kind of keeps herself fit. Now, Mirabai finds herself at a very, very precarious situation right now, also very promising in a way because she's, for the last year and a half, struggled with numerous injuries. We saw that at the Asian Games too, where she hobbled off. She's had a thigh strain, a shoulder thing, back, neck, lots of issues with Mirabai there. She competed in a first tournament at Thailand towards the end of last month. Didn't go exactly as planned in a way that, from a spectator point of view, I say not from a Mira point of view, where a lot of people would have assumed that she'll come and start going or touching the 200 kg mark. But she lifted just 184. And I say just very cautiously over here because we are looking at a total that the Chinese weightlifter lifted was in the upwards of way up of 200. Vinayak, how do you see Mira's comeback? I have my 2 cents, but I'd like to have you go first and see how you assess that situation there.
Yeah, you are in a much better position to talk about Mira than I. But yeah, going off what we've heard so far, they are certainly taking it cautiously. So I think it's a little bit about managing the expectations and the workload, because there's certainly a lot of expectations around Mira just because of what she's been capable of in the international circuit. But whether after all the injuries that she's had, even if she manages to get close to 100%, does she have a 90 in her? Whether she's sure or not is the biggest question. I'm not sure whether she can get to 90 in snatch. Clean and jerk has always been her strength, and that would, I'm guessing, play a big role in pushing her towards the total that she would need to be on the podium. But yeah, I guess it would depend a lot on where she is with her snatch closer to Paris. From what you had reported in that piece, she appears confident and her team appears confident, would you say?
Yeah, they do. So at the World Cup in Phuket, they went with a clear-cut plan just to test her limits. And by limits, they didn't mean that whether to lift for a world record thing or Mira's personal best. The thing was she hadn't lifted for a while. So the plan was to just go there, execute 1 lift each in snatch and clean and jerk and see how she feels. During the warm-up, Vijay Sharma, her coach, said that we were already there and Mira was feeling fit, she was feeling good, so why not give all 6 lift a proper shot and see how much she can actually take the load. From the parameters they had set, she ticked almost all boxes. She returned with all 6 lifts pain-free, which was the first big thing that they wanted to check. And now it gives them the confidence to work on the strength part. But at the same time, Vinayak, I think they have also kind of realigned their goals. I think in December, it was when I previously spoke to them about their targets for Paris and stuff. So they had set a target of 207 kgs, lifting a combined weight of 207. That's kind of realigned and now set at 205 as a benchmark. So even though it's 2 kilos, it shouldn't make a lot of difference. Mira and Vijay both say that if she lifts 205, it kind of in a way assures a silver medal because the Chinese is way ahead. So it's kind of out of reach as of now. So unless the Chinese girl bungles big time, Mira can't kind of challenge for the gold medal. At the same time, there are these lifters from Thailand and from, I think, Ecuador. North Korea won't be there at the Olympics. None of the other contenders have lifted more than 200 kgs. The best they've done is 200. So what Vijay Sharma and Mirabai both said is at the Olympics, they'll have to do something new. They'll have to execute a new lift, which is more than 200 kg. It's not always easy at the Olympics, which is the same logic we use for Neeraj Chopra, that if he has a 90 plus throw beforehand, it gives him the confidence of doing it again when the situation demands. So it gives them confidence that if Mira stays fit, and she lifts like 205. She lifted 203, I think, for Tokyo silver medal. So if she matches 203 or 205, it'll be enough for her to be among medals and probably then even win a silver medal. So it's an interesting calculation, but it all depends on how fit she remains.
Yeah, I mean, especially in a sport like weightlifting, that's there's so much to account for in the lead up in terms of building up to peak fitness and all that. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on.
Surely, yeah. And she isn't competing anyway, so next stop will directly be Paris.
Yeah.
Let's see how that goes. Which one do we move on to next, Vinayak? Hockey, badminton?
Badminton would be a good place to go next, given we've just officially found out, well, not officially it'll be April 30th when the list is out, but we know mathematically who have all qualified for Paris from India, given that the Asian Championships is over. Yeah, so we're going to send the joint largest badminton contingent to the Summer Games at Paris, same as Rio, with one women's singles this time around, two men's singles. That's the first time since 2004 that we're going to have two men's singles players with HS Pranoy and Lakshya Sen qualifying. Satwik Chirag, of course, they've just not qualified. They've smashed through the qualifying period. Really good space they are in at the moment. Yeah, fingers crossed for them. They look red hot favorites for a medal for starters. And of course, the last pair to qualify was Ashwini Ponnappa and Tanisha Crasto. Very interesting combination. They started playing only in January 2023. I don't think it was planned that they would be a pair. Typically in women's doubles, you have these players of similar ages competing. Very unique situation with Ashwini and Tanisha, as nearly 14 years separating the two of them. Ashwini, a veteran of now going to be 3 Olympics, and Tanisha, debutant, 34 and 20, if I'm not wrong, their current ages. So that's a very unique sort of combination that came together out of nowhere, with Ashwini looking for a new challenge and Tanisha's mixed doubles campaign not going so well, especially with Ishan getting injured. Then they just started clicking, and they did something very smart in terms of playing a lot of Super 100s, international series, and the lower rung tournaments, which they actually ended up winning and reaching finals, which I think came very handy in the end, especially with Gayatri and Triza focusing on the bigger events. The youngsters kind of fell out of form and fitness end of the last year, and they haven't just been able to hit the same level that they've shown to be capable of in the past. And, a lot of us thought Gayatri and Triza were favorites to go to Paris in women's doubles, and Ashwini and Tanisha have just been very smart about it, came out of nowhere in the last 1 year, and officially, mathematically, they've earned their place for Paris. So we have now 2 doubles pairs going to be in Paris. So yeah, don't think they're going to be medal favorites, honestly, looking this far ahead. But it's really nice that Ashwini has managed to pull off this late in her career. I think it's a very, very notable achievement for her to return to the Olympics after missing out in Tokyo.
And that's a very important point, Vinayak, you make, because we always kind of obsess over medals and forget how tough it is to even reach the Olympics. I mean, we look at, say, Sindhu or even Lakshya Sen. For the longest time, even though there was not much doubt about Sindhu, but it wasn't a straightforward journey. So for someone like Ashwini to kind of be there constantly, and I mean, she's renovated her, she's kind of, reimagined her game, got new partners, she's remained flexible and being rewarded for that. So it's quite incredible in that sense.
Yeah, that's a very good point you make. I mean, we are obsessed about medals and prediction of how many medals India will win. We sometimes forget how difficult it is to get there. And I think with badminton, it's especially worth noting because I don't know if there exists another sport in the Olympic roster that is as difficult to qualify as badminton is. Just because what it takes to get there, like weightlifting, you see, Mira turning up at a World Cup, just entering. I mean, I'm not saying weightlifting is easy, but the qualifying norms are a little different. In hockey, you just need to win, one tournament or you get another chance, another tournament. Here, it's 1 year of qualification and you have to have 10 tournaments and you have to play week in, week out to make sure that you're not missing out on ranking opportunities. It's completely and utterly draining to be a part of this Olympic qualification cycle. Sometimes you have this FOMO, like if I skip a tournament, and what if I miss out on a chance of getting all those points, and you end up participating, you end up getting injured. So much can go wrong in the badminton qualification cycle, as Lakshya Sen nearly found out, but managed to turn around just in time. Like you said, his chances were looking very bleak when we spoke to him in January at the India Open. He looked kind of lost because he and his team believed that he was playing well. He was at his best fitness since 2022 when he had a very good year, but they were just not getting results. I think India Open, it was around 6 or 7 straight first round exits on the tour, and that's not how you're going to qualify for Paris. And they tried to, Lakshya said, I'm not thinking about it right now at all. And then the team tried to tell him that, let's forget about Paris, just start playing well, get the results. And he managed to get those 2 crucial semi-final runs in All England and Paris before that, and managed to turn it around just in the nick of time. It's like those, the marathons where you get that final kick, right? I think it was the case with Lakshya. He just came out of a very precarious situation at the start of the year to make sure that he gets to Paris.
No, it's incredible that, it'll be a record contingent for India's badminton team. So it's quite amazing. There will be another record contingent in shooting, and who knows, there might be more to the tally that's already qualified this week when the final qualifiers will take place. For women's pistol is one event where India can still win a quota. If that happens, then all boxes ticked in rifle and pistol events. This week, when the domestic selection trials to have the shooting teams for the Olympics, it's a long drawn process. Vinayak, you mentioned how tough it is to make it for the badminton team at the Olympics. If you're an Indian shooter, to even make it to the Indian team is a big deal because of the kind of depth of talent there is. I'm not, whether it leads to Olympic medals or not, it's secondary for me right now. But the fact that, there is such intense competition to make it to the Indian team, 4 rounds of selection trials spread over 2 months in 2 cities. It's going to be incredible. It will be mid-May when we know the final Indian team for the Olympics, the shooting team for the Olympics. But that's another sport which consistently has kept doing well, even though Olympic medals might not show it.
Yeah, so shooting that's a very interesting period that we're getting into with the domestic trials more than, the international qualification. Next stop, hockey, I guess, Mihir, your favorite subject, the in-house hockey tragic.
You brought it kind of straight back into the thing. But Vinayak, both of us have been watching those matches in Australia. I don't think it changes my opinion as to what India can do at the Olympics. We're talking about an Australia series, which was already very tough. India lost that series, but it was just a testing ground, wasn't it? We've spoken to the coach, Craig Fulton, before the team left. We spoke to a few players as well. And of course, given a chance, any team would like to win. But I don't think that's the only thing we should be worrying about right now as far as the hockey team is concerned.
Yeah, I think the important part about the hockey team is they're clear about where they're at. Right now, they're not under any illusions that they're the best in the world. They're going to turn up in Paris and win gold. I think that is important because that keeps them, grounded in terms of what they're capable of. But it's also not like they're turning up just for another bronze. It's a very clear-cut process that Fulton seems to have, which despite the results in Australia, there were good signs in Pro League against Netherlands. Historically, we've had more trouble against Australia than teams ranked higher above than India, right? The world number 1s and 2s and 3s. That sometimes we're okay playing those teams, but Australia is just, like we had mentioned to Fulton as well the other day, it's India's kryptonite. Unfortunately, we're in the same group as Australia at the Olympics, so that makes things a little tricky. But on the flip side, as I was speaking to someone else, another hockey tragic recently, that ensures that we won't play Australia in the quarterfinals at least. So if we do make it to the quarterfinals and we don't get a bad draw in terms of where we finish in the group, it is still, I think India are on track for the podium at least. So, despite what's happening in Australia, I wouldn't read too much into it, like you said. But yeah, hopefully the improvements show in against Belgium when we go to Antwerp and a few more Pro League matches. I think those are very crucial. So, yeah, another big month ahead for the hockey team as well. It's all getting geared up towards that, sort of tuning themselves towards Paris.
The go-to reaction or the go-to thing for all of us, I think, who follow Indian hockey is to kind of imagine the worst, right? And when you say that the good thing is that India won't play Australia in the quarterfinals, my first calculation when the draws came out and the match schedules came out was that India play Australia last and Belgium second last. Now, the problem with India traditionally is that they are slow starters into any tournament. So if there is any slip-up, and there are potential banana skin opponents in Argentina and stuff. So if there is any slip up in the early matches, then there is very, very tough matches ahead for you to kind of make up and be in there. So that's like my first go-to instinct when it comes to the hockey team. Hopefully they'll not make it tough for themselves. They'll do a professional job like they did in Tokyo against opponents whom they're expected to beat. So yeah, so that's the thing about hockey. Although yeah, I'm not too worried about what's happened in Australia. Although it does bother me that even though the team looked like, giving their 110% and still like Australia looked way better. So that's kind of a big concern there.
Right. What's next, Mihir? Anything else to look forward to wrestling, I guess, to wrap up? Alphabetically speaking and emotionally speaking, like saving the best for the last or the most chaotic for the last.
Wrestling Asian Olympic qualifiers, it'll be fascinating. I'm very curious to see how Aman Sherawat, Deepak Punia, Vinesh and all kind of get along in their qualifiers. Also, along with wrestling, there's sailing and rowing and all those sports also, which generally, they go under the radar. But over the next week or 2 weeks, I think they'll be at the front and center of our attention.
Oh, Mihir, yeah, one more thing that you mentioned. Like, if you're speaking about India heading into Paris, we have to speak about the table tennis qualifications. Two very historic quotas, so to speak. First time that the both men's and women's teams have qualified for the Olympics. It's kind of a big deal. We are not just going to send, one singles player here or there and hope for some miracle. Qualifying a team means also that, we have 2 singles quotas guaranteed. So, yeah, and both teams managed to do that with their ranking points, not necessarily by automatically qualifying, but they did enough in terms of their rankings to make the cut. And for the first time, we're going to have 2 teams. So that's an impressive achievement already in terms of heading into the Olympics.
Lovely. I think that's a good note to end this episode. I think we've covered as much as we can in the half an hour, which our producer Shashank Bhargav very kindly allots us. Shashank, is there anything that you would like to add over here, or should we call it a day?
I was curious about one thing. Like, when it comes to weightlifting, it seems like such a simple thing to get into, right? Like for any other sport, like team sports, though, you need a group. Even in solo things like shooting, you need a rifle, you need a shooting range. Swimming, you require a swimming pool. Weightlifting is just you and your weights. You can do it absolutely anywhere. You don't even need a particular, like for example, like to be good in cricket, you need the country to have a cricketing culture. So I was wondering, when it comes to weightlifting, are there countries that do better than the others? And what is the difference? Like, that's what I'm curious about.
Mihir will obviously know better, but I think weightlifting also has this country culture where, China is, that China will have dominance across the board. The South American countries usually have sort of that historic weightage. We've never cracked weightlifting despite Karnam Malleshwari being one of those first movers in 2000. Not sure, probably there are more reasons to it. Until Mirabai came along, I don't think we were really, seeing a breakout star, and Mirabai did something that, most people didn't expect at this point of time. But even after Mirabai, we've not seen any breakout stars coming through. For some reason, it's always been these one-off. We do well in Commonwealth Games because Commonwealth, we are apparently as strong as most of the other nations. But when it comes to the world level, and China and, Korea, not so much now, but North Korea and all these couple of these South American countries, we've not been able to crack that. Mihir, you have a reason for that? Like, it's a very good question, actually. Should be simple enough to crack.
Is this a theory that I may be off mark totally here, but I think it's also about a community thing in terms of, having like a solid numbers at a very early level. I don't think it's a sport that's in a sense a community sport. It's still seen as a thing ki ab gym jao, weight uthao, and that's it. So it's not seen as a sport as such. Also, like, there has been a historic doping problem in weightlifting as well. So a lot of India's good lifters were then like suspended and stuff. So that's been a routine problem. But I think just the broad base, right? It's not a broad based sport. You've had like 1 or 2 instances of success, like Vinayak mentioned. But the fact that we talk about, say, shooting or badminton or javelin now, the reason for the success is also because you've had a huge pool of people who have taken to the sport. So you've got a lot more people to kind of develop, to select from, and then that's how the culture kind of develops too. I don't think that's happened with weightlifting in India.
Which is weird, right? I thought like maybe Mirabai in Tokyo would probably do it, but I don't think that actually happened. Commonwealth Games, we had like a couple of youngsters who came through, but they've not really done anything since Commonwealth. So that's a very good question. I don't know why we've not been able to crack that. I think it's just, like Mihir said, no one sees it as a sport, I guess. that's probably part of the problem.
Shashank always comes up with profound questions. He hasn't disappointed us today, and I think we should end at that. 100 days or less, depending on when you hear this, for the Olympics, they'll pass. मतलब आप blink करो और 200 days will be passed. So very soon we'll be talking about Olympics taking place next month, next week. Who knows? We'll be bringing you all the updates of the Indian athletes who will be preparing, who will be traveling to the Paris Games. And I think there's a lot more to discuss and dissect. Keep listening to Game Time. We'll be back with a new episode next week.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.